Hi guys, and welcome to the Faiāside podcast, and I'm your host Adam Boker, and I'm excited to introduce today's special guests, Vikram Bharati of Draper Startup House and George Yossi Samuels of Fire. So we'll be introducing them very soon. We're going to be discussing and chatting, having a fireside chat about community, entrepreneurship, and anything in between. Hey George, how you going?
Going good.
Excellent. Hey Bharati, Vikram. Sorry. So So this is Vikram Bharati of Draper Startup House, the founder, and George Yossi Samuels of Fire, founder of Fire, managing director of Fire. And feel free to introduce yourself, guys. If you can go first, Vikram.
Hey, hi Adam. That was a really long countdown. It went down.
I know it was.
I've never seen a countdown that goes from 28 to 1.
Yeah, it's quick. Straight into it.
Yeah, but I love the music. It got me pumping. Yeah. Introduction. Well, my name is Vikram Bharati, and thanks for having me on your podcast. Is this a podcast or how do we?
Podcast initially, we're kind of adapting it a bit. It's like a podcast, vidcast. It's basically a weekly show where we get some great inspiring speakers and guests from different founders, entrepreneurship community. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's fantastic. I am working on an interesting project right now. It's called Draper Startup House, and we're trying to build a global community and a global network of startups and entrepreneurs, investors, using sort of hospitality spaces as the foundation. It's really never been done before, and we're giving it a shot. And it's a very interesting time to be building a company that relies on physical travel, physical hospitality. So it's been an interesting ride this year. I'm happy to share some learnings if you would like. But yeah, I know George well. I've been working with George for over a year now, or maybe more. First met George when he was a guest at our space in Singapore. We became friends, and now we work together. And it's been great. George is amazing.
And so is Vikram.
I agree. I concur. And welcome, George. And if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Founder, managing director for Fire. We're based here in Singapore. The birth of my company actually did happen while I was at Vikram's original Tribe Theory startup hostel. And from there we kind of connected around a third cultured kid event. I think that was the first event that we actually both attended because we are both third cultured kids. And we can talk more about what a third culture kid is later.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you could, firstly, if I can just briefly ask, what is a third culture kid, and then secondly, leading on to that, if you'd be able to ask Vikram a question that you've got of him as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Actually, Vikram, this is a good sort of test, right? Like, what did you learn about a third culture kid?
Yeah. So I think the official definition of a third cultured kid is parents of a different heritage or background, but you grew up somewhere else in the world or grew up in a different environment. I think that's the technical definition of a third cultured kid. But I think it's a bit more than that. I think it's in today's world, third cultured kids are becoming more and more common just because people move around a lot more because travel is a lot more accessible, as well as moving to different countries or different environments is a lot more accessible. And so we're seeing a lot of different children grow up in different cultures and environments. And I don't think third culture kids have to be global in nature, because generally people identify themselves as third culture if they grow up in a different country or continent. But I think you can be a third cultured kid in your own country. You could be from Australia, from Sydney, but then move to Perth and have parents from different parts of the world, but you could be a third culture kid, even in your own town, I suppose. But I guess it's a confluence and mixes of cultures and backgrounds and environments that you grew up in.
100%. And especially as the world gets more, globalized, and there's, a lot more mixing and fluid families, this is, definitely become more and more common. And usually you can kind of know a third culture kid if at any sort of point in their life they struggle with the question, where are you from? And they might just be like, that's a complicated question. And a lot of the time, it does end up becoming a lot about identity. So it's kind of like no surprise that I met Vikram the way that I did at Tribe Theory, and that he's actually created a business that appeals to a lot of these third culture kid types, and why we both are pretty much about communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think in the future there's going to be fourth cultured, fifth cultured, sixth cultured kids, and I think this is the future of humanity. I don't know how long it's going to play, how long it will take until a huge part of the population of the world becomes very diverse. But I think it is the future, because I feel that diversity is a natural state of affairs on the planet. You look at jungles and forests. The more diversity you have, the more thriving an ecosystem becomes. Whether it's plants or whether it's bacteria. So I think I hope the world becomes more and more third cultured and more diverse, because I think that's where the beauty of innovation happens. That's where a lot of magic happens, I think, when the world becomes more diverse.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question, which you brought up there, because I'm trying to know as well, is for both of you, so Vikram and George, where are you from?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. Sure. So I was born in India, but I was born in a very small, a very unknown part of India called Nagaland. And so if you type in Nagaland in the Googles, you'll see that it's a small state above Myanmar. And so it's more to either side of I guess Southeast Asia. And this state, Nagaland, is an interesting place because the people in that region don't look like your normal Indian, sort of visually physical representation of the population. They actually look a lot more like me. And if you were to meet me on the street, you wouldn't probably guess that I'm from India, because I have a lot more sort of Asian features. So my dad is from the middle of India, in a place called Rajasthan, which is the representation of that state is like people look like normal Indian features, whereas my mom is sort of like Burmese origin, and she looks a lot more Asian. So the confluence of those two, made me. And so that's how the two different cultures combined together. But then I grew up in California, and so Los Angeles is where I grew up. So I grew up with American culture, American environment, and now I live in Singapore. I've lived here for 4 years, so I'm back in Asia. So I guess I would be a textbook definition of a third cultured kid. But also, I think there's a bit more than that, because my father was a Hindu and a vegetarian, and my mom is a Christian and a heavy meat eater, and so very different cultures of just the parents. And so I think all of these things has made me a lot more curious about the world at large, as well as how do other third cultured kids in South America, how do they live, what do they think, what do they talk about, and what are their interests? or third culture kids in Sweden? What are they like? So I think that was probably the origins of why I travel so much, or traveled so much before COVID, is because I think there's an inherent curiosity of trying to find other people who may be diverse like I am.
Excellent. No, great.
And Vikram, how do you think that's shaped your worldview? Right, because I know we've had a lot of deep philosophical chats as well, but how do you think it's shaped your worldview?
Yeah, well, it's made the world really small for me, and I think it's played a major role in the way I look at the world, because the world is really not as big as I used to think it was when I was a kid. By the way, there's like a little crackling noise. I don't know if that's from my side or...
I think it might, Adam. It's all right. Yeah. Yep. Or you could just mute yourself, Adam, when you're not talking, and then that could reduce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's definitely made the world very small for me. So when I sort of look at the planet, or look at the world, when I look at South America, it seems to me like it's very similar to Southeast Asia. Or when I look at Europe, it's all sort of one piece of land for me. And I know it's very diverse in terms of cultures and languages and food and all of that, but I still kind of view the world as a very small place, it's not as daunting to me as I think it is to a lot of people who may not have traveled so much. So in that sense, the worldview stems from that. So when I look at things like politics, when I look at things like culture, it stems from this sort of underlying belief that the world is very small, and that shapes the way you sort of look at conflict in the world. I think that shapes the way you look at geopolitics around the world. And it's more like, why can't we all get along kind of a situation. But I mean, of course, the world is very complicated, but I just think it's very small.
Yeah, well said, Vikram. I think it's interesting hearing you say that, because that's kind of like even my belief too. It's like, why can't people get along? And then as we've gotten older and, having to accept some realities that, of course, everybody just comes with their different views and mindsets, etc. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And we live in such an interesting times, because every time you turn on your phone or your computer, and this is the bad news everywhere. But statistics show, and I think this shapes my worldview, which is the world is a lot better. It's a much better place than it seems when you turn on your social media. I think people do get along a lot more than it seems. Like, less people are dying today than ever before. There are less people that live in poverty today than ever before. There's a lot more trade and cooperation amongst countries than ever before. There's less disease than ever before. I mean, the world is a much better place today than it was 30, 40 years ago. And so I think my worldview is that most of the parts of the world are good. People are inherently good. I think 99.99% of the world population are good people. And generally, the chances of you meeting a really terrible person if you walk into a crowd is a very small percentage. And so I think that worldview has shaped my ability to trust people a lot more than maybe I should, because like in business, you don't want, you want to keep your guards up. But I think I'm generally a lot more trusting, because I sort of look at the data and say, wow, like if I walk into a crowd of an unknown people, say 1,000 people in a music festival where I don't know anybody, the likelihood of someone being a real prick is a lot smaller than generally people are really nice. And that's been my experience going into some really unknown places while I was traveling. You go to unknown places in in Peru or in Turkey or in Morocco, and people are nice. People are inherently nice, and because I think we all want the same things. We all want to live a happy life, and we all want to make sure our families are fine, and so what was the question again, George?
That's all right. You went on a tangent, and it was perfectly fine. Even I forgot, I think, what the question was. I was just enjoying hearing you. But I think I would love to maybe have you share your sort of career history, right? Because you've got a very interesting career history. It's quite diverse too, in a way. So maybe just share, like where you began and then how that led into, Tribe Theory and then Draper Startup House.
Yeah. So I've been very lost most of my life, to be honest. I've sort of moved around from places and situations and careers, being very lost for a very long time. I think I have only very recently, sort of probably in the last 5 years or so, sort of found the confidence in myself to pursue things that I want to do. But prior to that, I started my career in finance and banking, which was actually a very sort of natural a natural thing for me to do based on my worldview. So when I was growing up, my dad exposed me to a lot of global things. He would, the books he made me, or the books he exposed me to things like, the yellow National Geographics. I don't know if you guys remember those. They don't make them anymore, I suppose, but they used to, and those books really got me curious about the world. And when I was in college, I sort of looked at what discipline was the most interesting for me, and I naturally gravitated towards business, finance, and economics because I felt that topic covers pretty much all the different disciplines in the world. What I mean by that is, like, if you really want to understand economics, you have to understand people. There's a lot of inherent understanding of human beings and human behavior that goes into understanding, money. And so I just felt that if I could understand what is money and how do you make money, then you kind of have to really understand things like politics. You have to understand things like, psychology. You have to understand basically all the disciplines that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. Maybe not as deeply as if you focused on one specific topic. So I naturally gravitated to that because I wanted to sort of really understand the world at large, and I just felt that economics was the way to do that. So if I really just went into studying biology, it would be a very sort of a discipline that would not give me exposure to lots of other things. So I naturally gravitated towards economics. And when I was in college, I did internships as a stockbroker intern. I did internships in private wealth management. I did internships, as frontline, bank teller. I did internships in various different research, various different components of finance and economics. And when I graduated, I worked at a bank, basically, and got exposure to very large projects, large companies, across the world. And so that's how my sort of career began. And I'm doing something very different now, but I think my career definitely has shaped my worldview in terms of understanding how companies work across the world. And so hopefully that translates into some experience in helping build Draper Startup House now and in the future.
Yeah, beautiful. It's interesting. Yeah, you bring up the point of like, yeah, the feeling lost. Because for Faya with Adam, we talk about like this lone wolfism. There's a period, right, where you just kind of feel like you're a lone wolf out there, and then it's really about finding your pack. Because in the wild, wolves don't last long on their own. Yet in certain cultures, like lone wolfism can be glorified. It's like all about the individual. And yet you and I are both actually very much about bringing people together. And, for those watching, I've seen Vikram also in person is very good at connecting people, and, tribe theory originally before Draper Startup House, right? It was about the tribe. And I think that's what attracted a lot of people in those early days. And I watched it blossom and grow from very strong word of mouth, because you were able to create an environment that was tribal. Mm-hmm. And so I would love to touch on as well, Draper Startup House originally started in Singapore, and the building itself, right, was based off of a clan association. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking about this recently. Can you share a little bit of that sort of origin story?
Yeah, it's a very, very, this is why I love Singapore, and I love being in Asia, because there's amazing stories that you uncover all the time. So in 1820, there was some dynamics happening around the world. So there was a lot of colonialism happening, and so Singapore was colonized by the British, and that mission was spearheaded by Sir Raffles. So in Singapore, like Raffles Hotel, he's famous in this part of the world. He was heading to colonize Singapore because it was a big trading hub, and that's what's made Singapore very successful, is because it's geographically located in a very strategic trading route from Asia to Europe. And so Raffles saw that as a very strategic place to post a British, expand the British Empire. And at the same time, there was dynamics happening in China where a lot of people from different parts of the regions of China were starting to venture out into the world. And there was this 16-year-old carpenter named Aceh. He wanted to sort of spread his wings and go out and venture out into the world to seek opportunities outside of his environment. And he somehow ended up on the boat with Raffles. And and he helped Raffles plant the British flag, in Singapore, and he became a scout for Raffles. And he did a lot of, he helped Raffles with various different scouting things. And by the way, this is all legend. I don't know how much of this is factually true.
Founder stories, right? Founder stories.
It's a combination of factual events and some of legend stuff. But anyways, Aceh, Raffles was very happy with him, and so British gave him a piece of land as a gesture of gratitude. And so this kid, he's 16, 17 years old, very enterprising, and very entrepreneurial. He started businesses, timber, spices, and whatnot, and he became a very wealthy person. And the legend says that he's like Singapore's first entrepreneur, because he was the first person to sort of, really set up companies, etc. And then he wanted to give back. And so he started Singapore's first, they call them clan associations or clans. And these, he wanted to help other people like him, other immigrants, Chinese immigrants from, his province of China who were coming to Singapore. So he set up a house and an association, and it was a place where people would come to make friends, find job prospects, find connections and networks, all the things that new immigrants needed. And so that clan is called Nin Yang Wei Kwan, and they own the shop house where we started our first location, our first tribe theory location, where Draper Startup House is today. So it's like it's I love this story because it's exactly what we're trying to do globally. Build spaces for these sort of physical network effects to happen for business creations and building your networks. So yeah, that's the background and story of the Chinese clan. But it's George. I think it's interesting when we talk about individualism versus a collective, which is what you sort of refer to, tribes and clans. But I feel a little, I don't know what the answer is, but I feel a little conflicted in the sense that I do agree that as a collective, you're better off as a collective, right? Because you help each other out. And I think the world has thrived as a collective more than as individuals. But there's something to be said about individualism, and I grew up in the U.S., right? And so the individualism is something that is a cornerstone of the American ethos, right? Which is you work hard, you make your destiny, you create your opportunities, and so that individualism, I think, is a very strong and relevant topic, because I think it's a combination of a collective, but ultimately it is about the individual. It is about you and me and Adam, because we're responsible for ourselves ultimately, and so I think tribes or clans are a way for the individual to prosper. And the individual prospers more when they're part of a larger collective. But ultimately, it is about the individual, right? It's about individualism. I really believe that because, if you look at Eastern philosophy, you look at Hinduism, it's really about, elevating yourself. It is about, if you look at even like Buddhism, right? It's about nirvana of yourself. It is about the individual finding his or her, way in life. And so, George, you're the master, and you have a better understanding of sort of the academia behind individualism versus tribalism. And I think there's a fine balance, but I'm definitely much more inclined to believe that ultimately it is about the individual.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page, because you and I, and this is something I've also noticed even with the third culture kids, right? We're kind of like on the edge or in the middle. We're like, sort of like a bridge between worlds. And there's a quote that we have for Faya and even in the pack, right? The strength of the wolf is the pack. The strength of the pack is the wolf. Mm-hmm. And it actually acknowledges both. And I think sometimes in the East versus West, they're looking at one or the other. But that's the paradoxical nature, mm-hmm. Of that there's the individual. I think it is important for the individual to be strong on their own. Mm-hmm. But as you said, right, it is when they join a collective, they can be stronger together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I definitely, I've also been raised in the West, but like my Polynesian background is very much more about the collective. But I've seen the damage of that too, whereby sometimes doing everything for the village or the clan or whatnot, it can give you a sense of purpose and meaning, but can also rob you of your ability to feel yourself. Mm-hmm. So much so that you're at the whim of everybody else all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's sort of my view on it as well.
Yeah. I guess a collective is only, it's made up of individuals, right? And if you look at a government, what is a government? Government is a makeup of individuals coming together to run a country. Mm-hmm. And this has been a very interesting for me to watch what's happening in the U.S. over the last 6 months or not, with clearly with how they've handled COVID, and also with the Black Lives Matter and the protests and the amplification of racism and all the onslaught that comes with that. And it's very interesting to watch because I always wonder, like, why are these things happening? You know, why are people so against wearing masks, and why are why is there still such systemic racism in a country that is very diverse, right? And so clearly this is a very complicated topic because it goes back, it has a lot of legacy issues. But I look at countries like, the Nordics, look at Sweden, Norway, and what I find interesting is, by the way, the comparison is, I don't think it's as relevant because these are very small countries. But when I look at a population of, say, Norway or Sweden or Denmark or the Netherlands or Germany, all the individual people, the citizens of these countries are generally well educated. They're well traveled. They have a good sort of purview or not purview, good perspective in life. If you meet a German or a Dutch person or a Norwegian or a Danish person, generally, you can get a sense of like, okay, generally these people they've had a decent education experience in life, right? You can't say that about most Americans, right? And so I feel that the individuals in the Nordics have been, they've had a better, I guess, training in life, maybe. I would say these countries are generally a bit more socialist in nature, and not the bad connotation of socialism, but socialist in the sense that there's a lot more equitable environments, right? There's not a lot of disparity in wealth in these countries, and so in the U.S. the disparity is massive, right? So I think these countries have done well because they're comprised of individuals who probably have had a bit more, a better upbringing in terms of education and experience of the world.
Yeah, good point. Adam, do you want to chime in on anything? Sorry, man, we've just been.
No, it's okay. It's great. I'm getting some great insights, and I find it really interesting the perspectives of both of you, and the diversity as well, and then the difference between individualism and community. And I really love the aspect of how strong a community is. But what I really liked is the sense of it's both important. I've been sharing this with George as well. It's that the concept of because what we're finding is in the news, and you've got a lot of fear mongering from the news. But then what you said, Vikram, before is we're actually living in a world that's a lot better, a lot more optimistic, better things are happening in the world than previously. But at the same time, that it's really important to not kind of get too drawn into it has to be this or that. So for me, what I'm getting from what you guys are saying is. And what I love to share as well is it doesn't have to be that way. It can be more of so you've got the individual, which is great, and lots of positives of that, but also the power of the community and put together with structure with education, taking things into account, and general kindness, like you said, with the people. You go to a music festival and you don't get, there's not that many, very rare to get like a prick or something. But I think it's really important to have these sorts of discussions because it actually creates a bit more awareness. So that's kind of my sort of 2 cents that I've got from it. And I do have a question as well, Vikram, which from what you said before, you mentioned. Before we start talking about individualism and community and groups, and America and different Eastern countries, is you travelled quite a lot. What gave you what gave you the confidence to start your company, and with your experience before. So what changed? What gave you the confidence to start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it was one specific thing. I think it was probably a combination of many years of me wanting to build something for myself, or build something of my own, or at least build something that a vision that I had. So I think that it's been years and years of wanting to do that. And maybe not finding the right time, place, or idea to pursue. But when I decided to pursue on this path, it was an idea that I was very excited about, and it was sort of like I finally found the thing that would excite me, and that I would feel passionate about pursuing. So I guess there was a component of that, clearly, but also I think it was also a component of me being in the right situation in life where I felt that I had ticked a lot of boxes, that if I wanted to go back to sort of a normal career oriented, climbing the ladder kind of a job, I could. And so I felt a bit of confidence in the fact that I could do that if I wanted to. And also, a big part of it was, I married a really awesome woman who kind of took care of me and still takes care of me, and pays for things and buys me things, and make sure she makes sure that I don't go hungry, that the bills are paid, so I think I was very fortunate to meet a girl and marry someone that was very supportive of me pursuing this stuff, and also sort of supporting me financially and emotionally, and so I think that played a really big part. So yeah, it wasn't one thing. It was a confluence of lots of different things. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing was I found something that I was passionate about, and it was something that I was willing to pursue and give up, opportunity costs and whatnot to pursue.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And sorry, Adam, just quick thing. Just remember your audio, the mute when you're. Yeah, just because there was a clicking, I think.
Will do,
yeah. And just to add on to that too, Adam, I mean, the reason why it's an opportunity set that I'm very passionate about and willing to really, give it my all to pursue, is because I just feel there's a massive shift in humanity. There's a massive shift in the world happening, in these times and in our generation. We're talking about third culture kids, and we're talking about individualism versus tribalism, but you and I think we're all in the same sort of age category. I think so. At least we look at so we're in the same age category, and I think we this is the best time in humanity ever for us to pursue these types of ideas. And these types, right? Because if you think about it, we know the analog world and we know the digital world, and there's not a lot of people in humanity. They've had this moment in time where they know what a VCR is and they know what an iPhone is, right? Because if you look at the Gen Z or the Gen Y or the millennial, well, I guess we're millennials too. But like people born after us, they have no idea what the analog world was. They have no idea of what the world looked like before digital. And we know analog and digital. And so we have a perspective, our generation has a perspective which no other groups in humanity has ever had in the past or will ever have in the future. right? So in a way, I like to think we're special because we just because of timing of when we were born, at what time, during what periods of the world, that we have this unique perspective of analog and digital. And so what a unique perspective it is. So that's one. Secondly, our generation has lived through the most prosperous time ever in humanity. Like we really haven't had a war. We haven't had famines. Our previous generations, World War II, and they've lived through some horrific stuff. Even this COVID situation is not as bad, I would say, as like living through World War II. And so I think we've lived through such prosperity. We have lived through such comfort, such ability to move around. The generation before us never really got to travel as much as we did. They didn't have Air Asia and low cost carriers to like take you across, a very affordable, accessible way. And so I feel that this shift that we're going through in our generation is a seismic shift in the way the world is going to work, live, play, communicate, build. And I think we're just in such a fantastic place in our lives, in a macro sense, that this seismic shift is something that I want to build things in. And the physical infrastructure that we're trying to build with Draper Startup House, which is a network of physical spaces around the world, is something I would not have been able to do 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Like, this is the right time in humanity to build scalable physical infrastructure. I'll give you an example of like WeWork, right? For whatever, WeWork, good or bad, everyone has an opinion about it. But I think it's fascinating that in 5 years' time, or in a very short period of time, they were able to scale a brand, a physical brand, and build spaces all around the world in such a fast way, right? And I think that would have never been able to be done even 5 years before that, because of a couple of reasons. The flow of capital, right? The flow of capital, the way capital flows around the world today was never the case before, right? So in today's world, capital can flow from one place to another so quickly at a push of a button. That's a very unique time in history that capital flows so quickly. It's never happened before in our previous generation. And so I think the generation we're living in, and given the COVID situations going on, it's a terrible time right now. But it's a 1 or 2 year sort of like situation. But generally, I'm talking about our generation. Wow, what a great time to build things that will have a very good impact on digital nomadism and work from anywhere, communicate from anywhere, date people from anywhere. I mean, these are very, very unique situations that only our generation is fortunate enough to play in. And so all of these things are like very compelling to me. And so I just felt that these are the things that I want to pursue. And I found a large space to play in, which I was passionate about.
Awesome.
That's awesome. And I agree. We are special, and we're in this, this environment.
That's pretty much the main takeaway here. We are special.
And also that's super energizing. And Vikram, it's really, really great to hear that and your perspectives there. Well, I've got a quick question as well. I know with Draper Start, well, there's two actually. There initially 2 questions. So you started with Tribe Theory, and then it transitioned into Draper Startup House. So could you share with us the journey of that, and why, and how that happened, and how it's going at the moment? And then secondly is, I know there is a big vision and a target and a goal, and it's got a number to it as well. quite a significant number. So would you be able to share that with us?
Yeah. Well, I think the way Draper Startup House, our transition from Tribe Theory to Draper Startup House was the result of, I guess, chance or luck. I met Katie and Daniel from Tim Draper's community or team, and they really liked what we were doing with Tribe Theory, and I think Tim Draper understood the macro vision of what we're trying to do. And I think he understood that what we were trying to do as a thesis or as a philosophy of building a business was trying to capture a massive shift in the way the world is happening, which is what we talked about, right? And I think he deep down understood that we're going to have a lot of challenges, right? Because building something like this is not easy, because it's very physical in nature and operationally heavy, and not as scalable as people think it is, et cetera, et cetera. But the general thesis is something that he understood, which is the next 10 years, and that's the timeline that we have dedicated to building this company, right? We have a 10-year plan. These 10 years are going to be some of the best times in humanity to build something like this, which is brand building, right? And brand building is very important, and we can quickly build a global brand in the next 10 years that has not been possible in the past, as well as capturing this new group of people that we call digital nomads. And I want a better term than digital nomads. I don't like the term digital nomad. I think we need a better term. I call them seekers, seekers who are kind of like roaming around the world, traveling, working, being lost, trying to figure the next thing in their lives. There's a lot of seekers around the world. How do you capture them into a funnel through physical spaces and then unleash the potential within them? And this is all ties back together to the idea that this is the best time ever in humanity to build a company or build value, create value. And so inside of all of these seekers, let's just call them seekers. I think it's a better word than digital nomads, right? Seekers who are floating around the world. Within all of these seekers is tremendous potential for creating value, because a lot of these seekers, such as Ache, the 16-year-old carpenter who came from China, he was a seeker, right? He wanted to venture out, and he ended up on a ship with, the guy that colonized Singapore. So that seeker, he had an inherent ability to be adventurous, go out of his comfort zone, and he had the potential to create things. And so there are hundreds of millions of seekers around the world who are roaming around the world. How do we create an environment or infrastructure that can unleash the potential within them? So that as a thesis, right? That as a thesis is a very strong thesis. Now, how do you manage that, or how do you actually, execute on that? That's a different topic. But that as a thesis, I think, is a very compelling thesis. And so I think Tim inherently understood that there's potential there, and he took a chance on us. And he was kind enough to invite us to join his brand and his ecosystem to say, let's do this together. So that's how it sort of happened. We're still in the very early stage, Adam. I mean, like, this thesis it's a very profound and big thesis, and we're in the first inning of this sport. And in fact, I actually like to think we're not even the first inning. I kind of feel like we're in the locker room warming up, warming up and warming up and really trying to get ready. So when the game really starts, we're prepared to go out there and hopefully hit some home runs. When we first started Tribe Theory, George, you were a guest. It's a small dinky place. Who knew that we would get to where we are today? And who knows where we're going to be in 2 years from now, right? There could be another amazing thing that happens that we just don't even see coming. And I believe that that moment will happen because this thesis is too important of a thesis for people to ignore. And I'm just glad that we have a chance to play in this arena.
100%. No, sure. Adam has something to say here.
Yeah, awesome, Vikram, and I can feel, I can sense the passion there, and it's just the start. We're in the locker room. You got there's millions of seekers out there, and you just share with me there's a goal. It's a million,
yeah.
Building a million businesses, entrepreneurs within the 10 years. Is that right?
That's right. So our mission is to contribute to humanity by creating a prosperous society. And the way we're going to do that is we want to play a significant role in the creation of 1 million entrepreneurs or 1 million businesses, because my firm belief is that the best way to help society is to create wealth in society. And if you can create wealth in society, then a lot of problems get solved. Problems of racism, inequality, poverty, all of these things get solved if you can create wealth in society. And so I hope that I want to spend my life contributing to society by creating wealth for the world. And if I can play a role in creating 1 million businesses in the world, then I think that will be a contribution that I would be happy with. And so our mission as Draper Startup House is to play a significant role in creating 1 million businesses around the world. And how we're going to do that is through building a physical infrastructure that captures these seekers and then, creates an environment and an infrastructure to unleash, the potential within these seekers to then create businesses and give back to society by creating jobs and, employment, and, enabling other people to then fulfill their dreams as well. So that's a mission. Yeah, 1 million businesses, 1 million entrepreneurs around the world in the next 10 years is the goal.
That is an awesome goal, and as I said, it's just the start of it. So definitely exciting for everyone involved as well. So George, do you have any other questions connected to that, or anything else you'd like to? Vikram?
I think Vikram, my question for you as well is, what has sort of been your biggest takeaway, since starting this line of your work? What has been your biggest lesson or takeaway?
Yeah. My biggest learnings so far since starting this company is no one really knows what they're doing, and humility, the power of humility, because we had grand plans and we still have grand plans, but the ups and downs you have to go through, the humble pie you have to eat to go raise capital, the unknown situations of things like COVID hitting you and completely dismantling all the plans and I guess ambitions you had, right? These are such unknown factors that just come out of nowhere that I think no one really has a magic ball. No one really knows exactly how things are going to play out. And so sticking to your mission, I think, is more critical than ever. Because it's kind of like if you want to climb Mount Everest, the goal is to get to the top of Everest. But how you're going to do that and when you're going to do that can change, right? Like depending on a storm that comes, depending on accidents that happen, but you still have to really be mission oriented. And I think that's more critical than ever during these times, that if you don't have a strong mission of what you really want to achieve, then I think it's going to be very easy for people to give up. Because everything is very difficult during these times. I mean, everything is a struggle. Everything is amplified. The struggle is real and the struggle is amplified. And so unless you really, really, truly deep down believe in the mission or have a mission, then it's very easy to give up. And so the biggest learning is the humility that you need to have, but also really understanding that you need to have passion and really believe in the objective that you want to achieve, because the way you're going to achieve that is going to change. And no one, who knew COVID was coming? Like, no one knew, right? Mm-hmm. Like no one saw it coming. And so that changes things for a lot of people. But for me, I'm still very passionate about the mission, and we're going to have to figure out maybe a different way or a different approach or some pivots or whatnot. But the mission still stands.
Yeah, hope and optimism is definitely a very important thing during this time. And Vikram, I know you're probably best suited to that, for people during this time. And although I know also, you have your ups and downs like we all do on the path as founders or starting any business. But yeah, I just want to give my hats off to you as well, to be able to stick with it, during this time too. And I know that we've still got a lot more to go.
But also, George, I mean, we talk about optimism a lot, right? Like, you and me, we in our teams, we talk about that we have to be optimistic. And last night was actually a very important moment in my life. So I had a bit of a shift in terms of optimism. Ooh. Which was, so yesterday we're at Draper Startup House, and Adam, Singapore, as you know, is a very efficient country, and it's a very strict, the rules need to be abided by. And, we had some authorities come into our space because there's like social distancing, and right now, because we are hospitality space, they're being a lot stricter in those kind of spaces that people are living together and all that stuff. So we've been following all the rules and whatnot, but we lapsed on something unknowingly. Like, we didn't send in a report. We were supposed to send these reports every night, and apparently we missed a few nights of sending in a report of some temperatures or whatnot. Easy mistake. But yeah, so the authorities were there, and I just had this low moment, extremely low moment where I don't know what's going to happen. They can come shut us down. Who knows? I mean, they can, right? Because right now the government's they're taking extreme measures to make sure that this thing is controlled, right, in Singapore. So I had this moment of like, wow, I just kind of feel like you just uphill battle every single day, right? But then Anna took me to a dinner last night, and it was eating in the dark.
Oh, yes.
You're in this dark room, and all the people working there are blind. Mm-hmm. The server is blind. It's a company run by blind people, and I had this moment of optimism because I realized how lucky I am, because the people who are serving me, they're blind, and they're trying to make a living during these times. Imagine how difficult it is for a blind person to make a living during these times. And I was talking to the server at the end, and he was telling me that he could see his entire life until 3 years ago. One day he woke up and he just was blind.
Wow.
And the doctors, these things happen. These are rare cases, but they do happen where you lose your eyesight for various different reasons. He just lost his eyesight one day. Imagine waking up tomorrow and just not being able to see. But the optimism this guy had, where he was the funniest guy. He was serving us food. He was saying things like, he's like, yeah, because he's like, you don't know what you're eating, right? I was like, no idea. He's like, yeah, don't worry, these are leftovers from last night. Ha ha ha. He just was cracking jokes all night, and he was the funniest guy. He just was such a gentleman, and at the end he was saying, yeah, I'm blind. I woke up one day and I'm blind, and it's a struggle, but I can choose to be optimistic about my life, or I can choose to be depressed about my life. And he chose to be optimistic. And it did something to me emotionally, where I felt that optimism is a choice. It's a choice, and you could be in the worst possible situation, but it's a choice. And yeah, I felt better about being upset about a URA, enforcer coming to check in on our space, and then the optimism, it's a choice. So that was a very strong moment for me last night. And I hope that I can keep that sustained in my brain. And whenever I'm down, I hope to sort of think about that.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that's powerful, Vikram. And yeah, such a good reminder. During these times as well. I've been to this place. Is this the one near Arab Street?
Yeah. Knox.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
And then you had to guess what you ate right after.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Yeah, absolutely amazing. We are just above the hour, so maybe Adam, do you want to just close us off, or if you have a final question?
No, that's it. It's been. I'll close off the Faiāside chat, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I really do appreciate your insights, Vikram, and also your questions and insights as well, George. So it's been absolutely great, and I really do appreciate the time as well. And just one last one. Is there anything else you'd like to share or promote to the audience, Vikram, but before we sign off?
Well, I mean, nothing specific comes to mind, Adam. But
any motto? Do you have a specific phrase or motto or quote that you would like to share in addition?
Yeah, well, the thing that I've been thinking about recently is I really believe that this COVID situation that we're in, we're going to look back at this time, 10 years from now or whatnot, and the realization is going to happen then in the future that this is the most. It's a difficult time, but it is also, this time has the most opportunities that we will ever see in our life. The opportunities to create new things, the opportunities to better ourselves, our thinking, elevate ourselves. These moments will not come again in our life. And so the choice is ours, that we take advantage of this once in a lifetime kind of event to either better our lives through bettering ourselves, or bettering our businesses or our communities or our families, whatever it is. That I want to constantly remind myself that this is once in a life opportunity to better ourselves and better people around us and just better our environment around us, and that we must take the opportunity and seize the opportunity. We won't see these moments again in our life. So that's what I would like to do. It's a seize the opportunity.
Seize the opportunity. Thank you so much, and that's absolutely fantastic. And again, thank you so much, Vikram. Thank you so much, George. And we'll add the link as well up for the seekers and anyone wanting to look into and join the Draper Entrepreneur Network or Draper Startup House and look into that. So thank you very much, guys, and thanks for being a guest, Vikram, on for the Fireside Chat, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Vikram.